All right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another special Black Desert video. So a lot of people have actually been asking me what it's like playing a Dark Knight, and so I wanted to make a video just basically going over the basics. I wouldn't really call it a guide or anything, but I'll go over like gear, skills, add-ons, and everything, just so for all of you who are interested in either playing it for seasons or re-rolling, I could give you a general idea of how to go about building and everything. So this is probably going to be a long-winded video, so I'll try to leave some timestamps in the description as well as some other videos that I've made in the past that are like more detailed of various things we'll be talking about. But how do we start? Dark Knight is probably one of the classes that I think has a very balanced set of skills compared to other things. So if you take all the classes, we all know the ones that are at the top, we all know the ones that are at the bottom. So overall, I would say Dark Knight is directly in the middle, which is, like, I guess in my eyes, the definition of balanced. But obviously everyone has their opinions of it. And yeah, so I would say that Dark Knight is more of a glass cannon type of class. If you've never heard of it, or like, you know what they do in PvP. So if you are going into Dark Knight as a PvPer, know that primarily your role is like an assassin, or you just pick off the stragglers in war. That's basically what you do, or you just follow the ball if you're in siege. It's the same thing. But just like in small scale stuff and 1v1s, you're not with the main group all the time. You're just like picking off the people in the back or on the side, as a comparison to like other games, like, I don't know, various MOBAs and stuff. So let's see, gear. Dark Knight is one of those things that has a higher accuracy set, so you're going to be building DR. I have actually in the past tried evasion with Dark Knight. I felt tankier, but it's obviously just not the way to go. And especially at endgame with the higher end spots these days, even the full-on evasion players said that DR is a lot better for high-end PvP. But anyway, so here's how I would go about building everything. So let's say you are a new player and you're wondering how to go about building from Tuvala. First of all, I know this may be a little bit different for other classes, but I would always go for the main hand first because it gives a lot of accuracy. So if you are going for PvE and PvP, generally accuracy is way more important than the extra bracket that you'll get for Awakening of AP. And I've always had this complaint ever since, I don't know, 6 years ago or something, that I think they should spread out the accuracy from the main hand to put it on the Awakening. That way there's not so much of a gap. And this doesn't specifically mean for Dark Knight, only just literally everyone in general. Because right now, the way to go for, like, it doesn't even have to be Black Stars, just a main hand in general. They should, like, take off about, I don't know, 25-30% of the accuracy from the main hand and put it on the Awakening. So basically you're getting the same stats at the end of the day. It's just that, like, the way you get accuracy on your Awakening weapon is by capressing it, or if you're on Black Star, is literally pen only. So yeah, that's one of those things where I think it would just help everyone. So other things to mention is, as a Dark Knight, you're probably going to be either building a little bit more accuracy or full glass cannon. And so what I chose was the Tungrad rings, when you have a choice of what is the Eye of the Ruins, which is HP and survivability. I actually decided, or I thought about that when I was considering going for the pen rings at like a year or two ago. And I figured that just more damage would probably feel better. And obviously for the rest of the pieces, Deboreka is the best in slot, very hard to get. But when it comes to gearing midway, Ogre is fine. I would probably not recommend going the Tungrad belt. It is 1 extra AP, but the difference is, like, when I say glass cannon, it is really glass cannon. So you kind of want to have a little bit of survivability, but you don't want to trade off too much damage for it. So this is the best, like, median that can still be in a higher AP thing and still survive a little bit. But everything else is whatever is at the cheapest price, get that. And yeah, like, let's talk about things in brackets of 3 AP, because if you look at accessories, for example, things go up in numbers of 3. So whenever your next upgrade for 3 AP is the cheapest, that's when you should go get that one next. But in my opinion, necklace usually comes first, followed by belt, then rings, and then earrings always last. And then when it comes to the armors, whichever one is the cheapest. The things you guys are probably going to be wondering about as well is what artifacts and crystals do I use? Now, I have a video for crystals. It's called, like, my crystal setup version 4 or something. I'll leave that in the description. And it's very detailed, and we're not going to go cover all of that today in this video. But the artifacts I use for PvP is mostly the Death Blow set. And it is a combination of 2 gradations and 2 blades. The blade Lightstones are actually kind of expensive, so I don't think it's a beginner-friendly one. But there are a lot of other things that I use for various things as well. Like when I'm grinding Gyfin and I'm just trying to level up and get XP, I literally don't even use that. I use straight XP crystals. So I do think for PvE, the best in slot 1 for Dark Knight in particular, and a lot of other classes to be honest, but Dark Knight, we'll talk about that in a minute, is Death Blow. So I would say the biggest thing is you're going to be thinking about spending 10 billion plus on the crit blade crystals or art of Lightstones. Let's see. Lightstone of Blade, yeah, it's like they're 5 vil each, and I know that as a newer to intermediate level player, 5 vil might actually just be an upgrade for you to the point where getting 2% crit damage is not the way to go. But anyway, here's some other options that I would choose for, like, entry level. So whether you're a PvPer or PvEer, this is an option you guys can use as well. This is the one that I used before I got any strike or blade crystals, and basically it's 2 magic AP artifacts with a combination of accuracy, AP, and, well, I had an air attack one because I didn't have a strike, and air attack is fine for Dark Knight, but it's obviously something you replace over time. So I used this for PvE as well as PvP. I thought it was fine. And then double accuracy artifacts. This is the one I use for more, I guess, for PvP, because accuracy, we'll talk about that later, is very important. And I think that for PvP, you should probably use double artifacts for accuracy and then build damage on top of that. So basically, it's the same thing. If you want to look at the 4 Lightstones you use, hardest one to get is probably going to be the strike one. And by hard, I mean it's just 5 vil, like the blades. So there's that. XP, if you're grinding, straight XP 400% is pretty nice. This one is an experimental one that I use as well. It's more of a defensive set. And basically it is 2 all damage reduction artifacts plus more defensive stats, so like HP, evasion, DR, and special attack evasion, which is really good. So if you want to play a little bit more defensively, it's more of an experiment for me. I know, as we talked about, Dark Knight is glass cannon, so, like, do I notice a difference? Yes, but is it going to save you from, like, a Wusa or Megu just going in? Probably not. And then the rest of these are life skills, but for most, like, high-end stuff where I'm not worried about XP and I just want to go for clear speed and trash loot and silver an hour, Death Blow is the way to go, but just keep in mind this is the most expensive one. And unlike other classes, going back into gear for a second, there are a few other options that I would probably recommend to you guys. So you know how some classes use different offhands? For PvP, Dark Knights really want to use a Neuver, just because more damage is always good. Whereas PvE for all classes is Kudum or Black Star. But you kind of do actually want a Neuver for PvP, and it will just help you overall. And the Narc Earring is more for grinding. I'd rather use Glass Cannon or just more damage on most things. But if I'm trying to find a different spot to grind, like somewhere new, I'll probably try it out, like doing my first few hours with the Narc, just because it might survive a little bit more with the extra DP. But for the most part, the important thing is Neuver for PvP, Kudum for PvE. Some classes just straight up use different things, but generally I would say this is pretty important. Neuver for Dark Knights. Let's see what else. Let's see. Okay, let's talk about skills. So if you are a beginner and you're wondering, okay, so what are the important skills? Let's categorize things by light, medium, and heavy attacks. Light meaning you use it more often and they do less damage. And heavies as in, like, they do big damage, but you use them on cooldown and you kind of go like different rotations for everything. So I kind of wish they would rework Dark Knights for beginners, because when you first start, they give you some like random skills that are more like PvP and not easier for PvP. Like eventually getting to 50 doesn't take that long at all, and you'll get all the skills pretty early on. But I just think for the first like 20 levels, they just kind of give you some useless skills. So it's not really that big of a deal. It's just one of those things that they could rework and give you some other skills early on. So let's talk about some skills. Here are the important ones that I would recommend. I'll talk about it in both the PvP and PvE perspective. So Airstrike is going to be one of your high mobility movement skills. So basically what it's going to look like is when you're just moving around, you up F and it takes you from point A to point B really quickly. So it's movement. I would not really recommend airstriking into enemies in PvP, even though it does give you invincibility. If you're PvPing, if someone sees you airstriking, the moment you land, they're gonna grab you and it's over. So it's one of those things that you get from point A to B, or you get out of a situation, not go in and dive, because the invincibility and super armor is very short and people will just grab you through it. And plus, desync and everything in this game is at like an all-time high. You remember when they promised that they're gonna have centralized servers last year and it's still not here? Yeah, that's a thing. So next we have slanted balance, and this is more of a PvP skill, because what it does is it allows you to basically like float the enemy if you hit them. Like let's say this is the enemy right here. I guess, hold on, let me actually just go into Battle Arena. Do I have that? Yeah. Might be easier to actually just show you the skills there instead. But yeah, overall, I think Dark Knight's a fun class. It's just, I would say it's harder to master compared to like Wusa in PvE, well, and PvP, I guess. But overall, let's show you some stuff. Where are the dummies? All right, so let's say an enemy is over here. We learned airstrike so far, right? There's a target. You airstrike him, and then that's one of them. You get floated. Cool. Next thing we have is slanted balance. They give you this early on, but I truly do think it is more of a PvP skill. So what you would do is usually you want to get back attacks on enemies, but like you would dash and then you hit them with slanted balance and then maybe hit another one too. So that basically knocks and floats them, so that's good. Other combos that I would recommend, I guess we'll talk about some for Succession in a bit, but another important one is Enforcement. This one actually does a lot of damage, and this is like if you get back attacked, knocked down by a Dark Knight, and then they like combo you with Enforcement, it just will chunk your health. This is one of the better ones. So anyway, the way it works is down RMB, and then you combo that with a ultimate. So another thing that I see people doing, and myself included, is you open with the F, or a lot of skills you open with your Unveiled Dagger, because it does give you attack speed and accuracy when you use it. So just by the tooltip alone, that was one of the skills they actually buffed, I would say about a year ago, so it's not like a new change. So you open with an F, right? And then we'll look at this again before we do the combo. So it's down RMB, and then the flow, you just hold RMB for Enforcement. So what you do is you F, and then, so that was that. So if you look at these numbers, what it means is there's a 2 CC limit, and it doesn't really tell you this in real things, but so each thing counts as a different like value. So like a knockdown or a float or a back attack, or not back attack, but like stiffen, those all count as a different value, but you can only get 2 total on enemies. So generally knockdowns are probably the highest priorities because they take so long. So when you get people, you just like down stiffness and then float, and then that's 1.7. So out of the 2 during the cooldown period. And generally that's one of the combos you can do. So you open, you get the attack speed and accuracy, followed by the Enforcement, and then the flow and ultimate. So one thing they actually nerfed about a year ago was Comma Slash, because Comma Slash actually does true damage, and it's one of those charged attacks that can be comboed into a lot of other skills. And it's one of those things, so you can use it like a combo like this, and then that's one of them. Or you could just charge it, which I think is generally better. Charging your thing does more damage. But while we wait for that, Wheel of Fortune is going to be one of your biggest AoE abilities. I wish they gave it to people earlier on, because not only does it allow beginners to grind faster, it also allows you to like implement it into your rotation earlier on, because this is something you do want to actually use on cooldown. So I would consider this one of the heavy attacks that we talked about earlier, because it does a lot of damage, and it is one of the slower ones. So the bottom few skills right here, like Lunacy of Vidir, is also a big damage ability. You kind of want to like CC the enemy first, and then you hit Lunacy, because it does require a little bit of a charge up time. And then after that, if you like get CC'd out of it, it doesn't even matter. So you want to like knock down your opponent first before anything. So what Wheel of Fortune looks like is it's a big circle, and it does have a huge radius. And if you are playing Awakening, the radius is smaller, but Succession has a bigger ring. That's kind of why I like it. So that's one of those things. And then the Comma Slash, again, you hold it and then charge. And then you can either let it go here by letting go of left mouse button, or you can like dash backwards, and then they'll send them down with a knockdown, which is very good. You see how long this person's like the target's on the ground for? That's when you knock them down, that's when you let off all your heavy attacks, and then things you just win most of the time. Obsidian Ashes, it doesn't really do that much damage, but it's one of those things that I think is an ability that you use during downtime. So like when all your big attacks are on cooldown, you could toss that in. Or if you are grinding and you're like PvEing, and then like let's say all these enemies are over there, you pull all of them, and then they'll come to you. So I use it personally more for PvE, but like if it's like downtime, it'll be a lot better. And then of course Corrupt Ground is also a downtime ability. It's not much damage. I think it's more used in PvE than anything. And then Lunacy of Vidir, obviously, like when we talked about this earlier, you knock down the enemy, and then you do the damage on that one. So one of the cool ones. So let's talk about the Magnus ability, because this one has been tweaked a few times and it can be flow comboed with a lot of things. But I would say Blooming Black Rose, it's like hard to fit into rotations. They made it a little bit faster to the point where it's more useful, but it's still one of those things I'm experimenting with and when is the best time to use it. But I think it's cool. You shouldn't lock it. Try to find a spot for it and they'll be good. So Spirit Legacy, this is actually going to be one of the ones that people use a lot. And the thing is, it does a lot of damage and you can spam it, but you shouldn't spam it because it does a lot of damage, but when you're using it on cooldown, it does less damage. So it's like basically what it looks like is that basically a spirit bomb. If you ever watched Dragon Ball before, it's like that, and you can spam it, but I wouldn't recommend doing it while it's off cooldown. So it's more useful. You can spam it in PvE. I guess it depends on what you're doing, but if you're like grinding lower end areas and you can just one shot everything, then it's more useful. But yeah, it's one of those heavy attacks where a lot of damage, could spam, wouldn't really recommend doing it. And down here in your secondary abilities, these are your movement skills along with where's the Twilight Dash and Phantasmal Snare. So whenever you see Dark Knights moving around like really quickly, it's generally because they're using a combination of where is it? Secondary. So it's like Phantasmal Snare, Twilight Dash, Airstrike, and where is it? Oh, I keep losing it. And Dusk and Smoky Haze. So basically, start off with this one. Phantasmal Snare allows you to move in a direction with F, and then it like puts little roses on the ground, and then you can Airstrike to make you move in a direction faster, followed by moving with Dusk and then chaining it like another 2 times. These are your PvE iframes, by the way, or just iframes in general, but it works really well in like the boss splits and stuff. So to give you an idea, let's say that dude is over there and you're trying to just make a movement, and so like we're gonna do this and then that. So yeah, it's one of those like movement things. You learn to do it faster over time, and then like Dusk and Chain Dusk and Smoky Haze, iframe movements. And so yeah, invincible during the skill in PvE. It's nullified during cooldown, so you can't spam it, but it's like on a 5-second thing anyway. So first of all, up shift is your Smoky Haze. It looks like that. You go invisible for a second, and next thing you want to do is like sidestep and 1 and 2, which is your Dusk and Chain Dusk. So that's for the most part your movements. I really wish they would buff this Vadir's Dogma skill, because it's kind of like, it seems like it would be good, but it's not good. It's one of those skills that they forgot existed in this game, so for Dark Knights. But one of the coolest abilities that Dark Knight has is Nocturne, because it can be used in a lot of different things. And when you look at the tooltip, it's kind of confusing because it looks like, oh, you have all the different guards, but it's how you use it. So as a basic understanding of Nocturne, basically you go invisible and then you hit a directional key, so like WASD, right? And then if you go like back or hit your S key, you'll do a back attack. If you do side, you'll do a different one. And so up is behind the enemy, backward and guard, so like defensive versus offensive. So as a general idea, when you Nocturne, you go invisible and then hit a button. And then usually for PvE, you hit like Nocturne and then A or D, so directional, and do like a back. So really just situational. It's one of those things you probably should learn as a Dark Knight, and it gets you out of situations and or like it does something defensively or offensively. So standard e-buff. But for Succession in particular, one thing you're going to want to learn is you're going to be using your Ravage Rake ability, because this is, I guess, one of those things where you just keep doing that over and over, and then you knock them back and then combo into a bunch of other things. So anyway, this is not something that you really use on Awakening. It's one of those extra filler abilities for Succession. So a lot of those skills that we talked about, you do it on both Awakening and Succession. The difference is Ravage Rake is a Succession primarily. And if you are Awakening, I think I do actually have... Can you switch setups here? Let me go over skill add-ons and enhancements for Succession, then we'll talk about Awakening. So, the Rabam skills, or skill enhancements that I use are Wrath of Vidir. The reasoning why is mostly one to pull in enemies, so like when you use it, it just looks like the... Oh wait, hold on. Kind of just looks like that. It's a big AoE, but at the same time, your accuracy and crit rate up, and I guess magic DP is pretty nice. It's not really important. It's just one of those things I find I like more. Wheel of Fortune, I used Unveiled Fate over Obsidian Blaze. The reasoning why is this one, by default, it minus 15 DP to your target, as well as like accuracy, crit, and everything. So it gives you buffs, whereas this one is just slightly more damage, which is irrelevant damage. So you'd rather have buffs for yourself instead, which I think is good. And as for a Slanted Balance, I use Balance Strike over Slanted Slash. And the reasoning why is, like, to be honest, I don't really use these often. I just chose the one that had more protection abilities. This one's on a 35-second cooldown, whereas this one's on 14. But your accuracy is up and invincible while moving and all that stuff versus a forward guard. So this isn't really that good of a skill. It's just I chose the one that felt more defensive and protected. So here's my add-ons for the most part. I swap it up depending on what I'm doing. So for Succession, we talked about all these skills that are like high priority. So like, let's say this is more for PvE, I would say, actually. But like, you could change, obviously, if you want to do it for PvP, change the extra AP against monsters to extra AP against players. And then the things you would also change are probably you would want to either add another like all accuracy somewhere, or change a crit rate to a plus DP, and for the most part, like, just change the things to damage against players or humans or whatever. And so basically, Twilight Dash, I would not Twilight Dash into a group of enemies. So let's say these are all real players. What you don't want to do is do this, because chances are you're going to get hit with a CC somewhere in that line, or you're going to get grabbed because it's not like that far. So what you want to do instead is, like, let's say you are near a group of enemies, you could just turn around and get out. Is like more of a remove yourself from the situation, or there's like other abilities that you can do as well. But otherwise, if you're doing it for PvE, you could just Twilight Dash right through the enemies, because they won't grab you most of the time, I think. Maybe in the future, who knows? That'd be kind of scary. Wheel of Fortune, one of your biggest abilities that we talked about earlier. It's a huge AoE, and it'll allow you to do more damage as well with the add-ons. Spirit Legacy is one of those things, remember, we talked about. So like, we have, when you hit an enemy, suddenly look at those debuffs right there with minus evasion, minus DPs, and so that allow you to even if you are like, you shouldn't be spamming it, but if you are, you're at least debuffing them, which is better than nothing. And then Slanted Balance is, the reason why I use it as an add-on is because it's only a 7-second cooldown, and we line up our cooldowns with the add-on effect. So like, Slanted Balance 7 seconds, these buffs that we get are also 7 seconds, so you use this on cooldown and you get the buffs as well, which are pretty nice. Comma Slash is a big damage ability, and whether you combo it with Twilight Dash, like you go in and then Comma Slash, or you just charge it up, either way you're getting some buffs on it. And Airstrike is your movement, so that's also what I use. So that's why I use those. And now let's talk about the Awakening. Which one do I have? Okay. All right, let's talk about the skills. So Overlord is the equivalent of your E buff for Succession, which is the Prime Spirit Absorption. The difference is, like, you can actually hit E, whereas this one has to be quick slotted. So that's a thing. So your main abilities with Awakening, you're going to be playing mostly on Awakening. You're barely going to be on your main hand bar. Well, slightly, but not really. So your main spammables are going to be, or your biggest damage abilities are going to be Shattering Darkness and Root of Catastrophe. And they kind of look the same, so just make sure to put them on your bars and it looks different. So just make sure you have a cooldown and you can actually see what's happening. Your mobilities are Trap of Vidir to get out as well. And like all of these, Cluster is actually one of the coolest abilities they have. They buffed Grip of Grudge about a year ago. You still use Twilight Dash, except on Awakening is F, whereas Succession is C by default, but you can remap it anyway, so it's not a big deal. And Dark Nebula is one of those things where you just there's like an orb in front of you. So basically, here's how a lot of things work. So here's a thing that I've learned. You can kind of cancel your C swap. So let me just show you what it looks like by default. If you're swapping between main hand and Succession to Awakening, this is how it looks when you just hit your C button. So, but things that I would recommend to all of you is try to, like, let's say you're doing an ability when you C swap. You could always just hit another ability, but like when you cancel it with another ability, you can do that as well. But one thing to go from main hand to Awakening is your, where is that ability? Spirit Hunt. And basically it allows you to do that. And then this is the same thing as usual, the Spirit Legacy. But then what you're going to want to do is Shift LMB and Shift E and then hold it with the flows. So it's like, it looks like that. And then flow. It actually does a lot of damage if you like CC someone and then get all of those off. And then your Spirit Legacy at the end. So what else do we talk about? Trap of Vidir actually used to be pretty bad back in the day. Now it's pretty decent. So it's one of those things where, let's say an enemy is charging you, right? And then you see that happening. You want to go backwards and it's like try to get out of the way. It'll drop a trap under them if they stand in it. But then it also gets you out of the way. So being able to combo a lot of things with Cluster of Despair is actually a very good ability. So like you hit an ability, it doesn't matter which one, and then you hold RMB. That's what Cluster of Despair, it looks like those raining swords out of the sky. It's cool, actually. Then Grip of Grudge, I personally think it's better suited for PvE. You hold that and then it pulls all the enemies in. It actually used to be slower than it is now. It got buffed. And then so when you do like Grip of Grudge, you can flow it into Soul Snatch, so it would be like that, and then that little burst after is Soul Snatch. Twilight Dash is what you saw before. Dark Nebula is Shift Q. If there's a lot of enemies over there, it looks like that, and it moves you forward into it, but it pulls everything else in, which is also good. So when it comes to core skills, I've seen people use like one of maybe 2 or 3 different things. So I would say for a beginner and just most people in general, the core Seed of Catastrophe is the way to go because it gives super armor during the skill. And you know how this was your Shift E, right? So like, let's say you're holding this, and then if you're doing it in front of an enemy, then you're probably, there's a good chance you're going to get grabbed or just like, they're going to CC you out of it. So having a super armor in front of you is like, it prevents you from getting CC'd for the most part, which I think is a good thing. I've seen people do Shattering Darkness in PvP, because if you're, let's say, Shift LMBing, let's say you're over here, right? And then if you're stiffening the enemies, it gives you that 1 extra second to throw in another skill. So I personally like the defensive one, but I also think stiffness is really good as well. It also counts toward that 2cc thing that we talked about earlier. And then Spirit Hunt is a little bit trickier, because you kind of have to be more into the melee range, which Awakening is not. So for the most part, Spirit Blaze is one of those filler skills. They actually sped up the timer for that. So before, this is how you use it normally: down RMB into RMB. So this is how you're intended to use it. So 1, 2, that was the original, and then the flow. What I like to do personally is I just like to hotkey the flow, because it goes out really quick. Back in the day, it was really slow to the point where just no one used it. And then that's about it. So I use the same things for both Awakening and Succession. The add-ons are a little bit different. This is also for PvE. What you obviously would change is the AP against monsters to damage against humans or players or whatever. And then you could also change some of these like crits for like more defensive things if you wanted to. But this is just what I use. This is my PvE setup. And yeah, that's for the most part a lot of the skills we talked about. I feel like I'm missing something, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. So we talked about gear and how to play Dark Knight in PvE and PvP. I told you like some extra tips you can get for gearing. We talked about our skills, add-ons, and everything else. And I think that's a lot of it, but I feel like if I'm missing something, you can always just ask, and happy to point you guys in the right direction. Generally, just what you need to know is when you're grinding, or just PvE in general, you're going to be moving a lot more than your average person. Like, let's say Wusa, for example. You know how to use that like wind tornado rainstorm thingy? Dark Knights don't have that. What we have is Small Wheel of Fortune. That's our AoE. Yeah, so, and then Wusa would just hit like all of these. But it is what it is. I wish that they would raise the radius, not even the damage, for a lot of things. And just know that if you take anything away from this, Dark Knight is a very mobile class. Not as like mobile as Musas or a lot of other classes like Wusas, Megus, Zerkers, but either way, you have a lot of iframes that get you in and out of abilities like your Dusk and then traps and everything. So yeah, that's a lot of it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Oh yeah, I guess one thing we should talk about. Are Dark Knights heavily mana and health dependent? In my opinion, I personally think that like early on, if you're just like going from pack to pack using Spirit Legacy over and over, just one-shotting enemies, yeah, you're gonna go through a lot of MP. But later on, as you play and learn how to do rotations more, your MP issues go away. Or just buy an infinite pot and all those problems also go away. So it doesn't matter, but that's about all I wanted to talk about. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys later. Peace.